Us. My brother pointed a gun straight at my face and hissed, "Sign the deed, Emma. Or else." My stepmother just stood there, arms folded, watching like it was a TV show she didn't want to interrupt. And my father, he didn't say a word. Not to protect me. Not to stop him. Just silence. Most people would have panicked. Most people would have begged. But I didn't. I smiled. Calm, cold. And I whispered, "Look in the corner." Jason's eyes flicked to the wall, and in that split second, his whole face drained of color. Because there, blinking red, was a camera, watching, recording, broadcasting. His jaw tightened, his finger trembled on the trigger, and for the first time, my brother, the golden boy who'd always been untouchable, looked terrified. But if you think the story begins with that gun, you're wrong. That was just the moment it exploded. The truth started days earlier, when a single word entered the room like a stone dropped into still water inheritance. We were at the family's old lake house in Tahoe, the kind of place where beige walls and mismatched furniture made it feel more like a cheap rental than a home. My stepmother Linda was fussing in the kitchen with sandwiches and potato chips, pretending everything was normal. My father Robert sat at the head of the table, moving slow, heavy, like a man who'd lived his whole life choosing silence over confrontation. And Jason, my older brother, walked in with perfect hair, perfect cologne, and that smile he wore like armor. From the outside, it looked like a family reunion. From the inside, it was a chess match. Because what none of them realized was that I knew. I knew what they were planning. I knew about the papers. And I knew they'd do anything. Lie, manipulate, even pull a gun. To make me give up what Grandpa left me. So when Jason leaned across the table and asked, "So, Emma, what are you planning to do with Dad's properties?" I didn't answer with words. I answered with silence, and that silence was the beginning of the end. Lake Tahoe, California. It was July, the sky a flawless blue, but inside that old vacation house, the air was so thick and heavy I could hear my own heartbeat sensing with the tick of a worn-out wall clock. The cabin sat quietly at the lake's edge, its wooden walls weathered and pale, the sofa fabric frayed, the carpet stained with marks that would never come out. It didn't feel like a family home at all, more like a cheap rental someone forgot to care for. But for them, it was the perfect backdrop, a stage set to look peaceful. While knives waited, hidden up their sleeves, my stepmother, Linda, was busy in the kitchen. She kept smiling, smiling so much that the grin turned stiff, brittle. On the table, she had lined up plates of neatly cut triangle sandwiches, a plastic bowl overflowing with potato chips, and fruit stacked into a pyramid like we were about to stage a photo shoot, not have lunch. "Eat something, Emma," she said, her voice dripping with honey, but her eyes flicked quickly toward Robert, my father, waiting for his silent approval. Robert, the man I still called Dad, sat at the head of the table. 60 years old, shoulders heavy, his shirt missing a button. I'd grown up in the shadow of his silence. He rarely spoke, and when he did, it usually bent in one direction, toward Jason, the golden sun. I watched him sip his coffee, eyes distant, as if the entire world had nothing to do with him. But I knew better. His silence was a kind of complicity. Then Jason walked in. He always looked like he'd just stepped out of a glossy ad, hair slicked, shirt crisp, the scent of expensive cologne trailing behind him like a shadow. He leaned down, kissed the air by my cheek, flashing a row of perfect teeth. "Glad you made it, Emma." I could smell the fraud in every word. To outsiders, he'd seem like the polished older brother, but to me he was just a man who'd mastered disguising his greed as charm. Lunch began. Forks clinked against plates, but real words were scarce. Linda kept nudging me. "Eat more, you're too thin." I shook my head. Jason rambled about traffic, his new car, while Robert only nodded, tossing in the occasional hollow comment. From the outside, you could have mistaken it for a normal family gathering, too much food on the table, small talk floating lazily in the air. But to me, every breath in that room felt counterfeit. I noticed everything. The mismatched chairs, the table leg that wobbled with each shift of weight, the dim yellow light overhead that painted their faces like masks. Each detail reminded me this wasn't home. This was a battlefield dressed up with bread and fruit. I kept my voice light, polite enough that no one could fault me, but I didn't let a single true thought slip out. Inside, the echo was loud and clear. They didn't bring me here for lunch. They have a plan. It played out exactly like a staged performance. Linda handled the props, sandwiches, chips, fruit. Robert was the silent audience in the front row, nodding without interference. Jason was the star of the show, brimming with confidence, waiting for his big monologue. And me, Emma Carter? I was cast as the villain, only because I held the key to a fortune they never thought would land in my hands. Outside the window, Lake Tahoe shimmered under the sun, beautiful, serene, like a postcard. But I knew better that calm was just the cover. Open the book and the dark pages were already written. That, ordinary. Family lunch was nothing more than Act 1 of the tragedy to come. Lunch dragged on in a strange, uneasy silence. Forks scraped against plates. Glasses clinked softly against the wooden table, but no words were strong enough to fill the void between us. I could hear every breath they took. Linda pretended to make small talk about my work, her voice pitched a little too high, as if everything were perfectly normal. Robert leaned back in his chair, eyes locked on his coffee cup. His silence stretched so long it had become its own language. And Jason kept adjusting his cufflinks, running a hand through his hair, his restless eyes darting around like a man just waiting for the real show to begin. And then, it did. Jason set his glass down with a soft thud that somehow echoed like a gunshot in that tightly wound room. He leaned back, smirk tugging at his lips, and asked the question. So, Emma, what are you planning to do with Grandpa's inheritance? The words hit the table like a boulder dropped into still water. Instantly, the air shifted. Linda blinked fast and lowered her eyes to the fruit bowl, suddenly very busy with a knife, and an apple she didn't need to cut. Robert looked up, gave me a fleeting glance, then dropped his eyes back down, fingers brushing the rim of his water glass. And me, I sat perfectly still, listening to my heartbeat slow. No one answered. But that silence thundered in my head like a storm. I took a sip of coffee, drew a long breath, and shrugged lightly. I haven't decided. It floated out of me as soft as a breeze, but I knew it was enough to test Jason's patience. For just a moment, his smile faltered, then snapped right back into that mask of confidence. Lucky you, he said evenly. At least you've got options. More than the rest of us. It wasn't just a jab. It was a knife slipped between the ribs. Linda laughed weakly, her fingers twisting the edge of her napkin. Robert tapped his finger against the table, then finally spoke. Family should share. It's the right thing to do. I set my cup down. My eyes went straight to his. No shouting, no scene. Just a calm, steady look. We'll see, I said slowly. Linda jumped in almost immediately, her words tumbling out too fast, desperate to smother the fire Jason had just lit. Emma, tell us more about your projects. That architecture firm of yours, how's it going? Her tone was rushed, pleading. But we all knew, she knew, they knew, I knew, that Jason's question had already changed everything. From that moment on, lunch stopped being lunch. It became a chessboard. Every word, every glance, every shrug was another move. Jason kept sliding in his little daggers, dressed up as jokes. Robert chose silence. Silence I recognized for what it was: consent. And Linda? She kept trying to glue the mask back on with fruit and sandwiches, piling watermelon onto my plate as if that could cover the stench of greed in the room. I sat there, polite on the outside, but inside one thought rang clear as a bell. This is only the beginning. And when this play ends, none of us will walk away whole. The question about the inheritance had dropped like a pebble, but the aftershock spread through the room like an earthquake. The thin layer of normal shattered, exposing the undercurrents I'd felt all along. Jason let out a low chuckle, his voice light as air, but every word hitting like a stone. You're lucky, Emma. You've coasted your whole life, never had to break a sweat, and somehow the universe just drops a fortune in your lap. Meanwhile, the rest of us, we grind every single day. His eyes locked on mine, gleaming sharp, as if trying to slice through the calm I was holding on to. I smirked faintly, said nothing. Sometimes silence is the cruelest answer. Robert cleared his throat. He straightened in his chair, set his coffee cup down, his cloudy eyes flicking past me before landing on Jason. Jason's not wrong. In a family, everyone should know how to share. You're my child, Emma, but so is Jason. We're family, and family doesn't keep everything to themselves. I heard it, every word, and felt them cut deeper than any knife. He didn't shout, didn't raise his voice, but his silence all lunch long had already spoken for him. He was on Jason's side. Same as always. Linda jumped in quickly, her hand brushing my arm, just soft enough to fake tenderness. Emma, listen to your father. Nobody wants to fight. If you'd just sign part of it away, everything would be easier. You'd feel lighter, and the family would be at peace. Peace. The word rang in my head like a cruel joke I almost laughed at. Jason burst out laughing, full-throated, arrogant, his voice bouncing off the small walls. That's right, Emma. Try being an adult for once. Stop acting like the world's always against you. Truth is, you've never carried anything in your life. You've only ever taken. I lifted my chin, my gaze freezing him mid-smirk. My voice came out slow, deliberate, carving each word into the table between us. You've got it wrong. I've never taken a thing from this family. All I've ever gotten was Dad's silence, and your contempt. The room sagged under the weight of it. Linda pulled her hand back, suddenly fascinated with her napkin. Robert glanced at me, eyes narrowing slightly before he turned away. That turn, familiar, predictable, hurt more than I'd admit. Jason braced both hands on the table, leaning closer, his breath sharp, hot with challenge. Say what you want, Emma. But in the end, there's only one choice. You sign, or you regret it. The words hung in the air, like a hammer waiting to fall, warning us all the game was about to turn dangerous. I stayed silent. Outside the window, the Tahoe sun sparkled across the water, blindingly bright. But inside, the weak yellow light from the ceiling lamp warped their faces, making them look like masks, slipping off at last. And I knew then, this so-called family getaway was nothing but a false aid. A storm was gathering, and it was about to pull us all into its center. The dining room grew so heavy I could feel every pair of eyes locked on me. Jason set his fork down with a sharp clatter, then pushed his chair back. The smirk still clung to his lips, but his eyes had stopped pretending. Robert rose too, silent, dragging his chair across the floor with a dry screech. And Linda, she stood last, brushing crumbs from her skirt as if still clinging to some show of grace. Come with us, Jason said, his tone clipped, decisive, more command than invitation. I didn't move right away. Every nerve in me screamed this was a trap, but then I stood steady, as if I were just following them to look at a hotel room. The hallway was long and narrow, lit by a single weak bulb that painted the wood, paneled walls, and uneven shadows. Each step echoed hollowly, like a drumbeat announcing the next act. My heart was slow, steady. I was ready. They led me to the last room at the end. The door opened, and I knew instantly this wasn't chance. The space was nearly empty, a small table in the middle, 2 chairs, a neat stack of papers waiting. No pictures. No curtains. No decoration. The emptiness made it feel less like a guest room and more like an interrogation cell. Jason pulled out a chair for me, his smile returning but rigid. Sit. Robert positioned himself at the door, arms folded, shoulders hunched just enough to block the exit. He didn't need to speak. His presence was a wall. Linda rested her hand on my shoulder, light but unmistakably pressing me forward. I sat. Jason slid the papers across the table, a pen laid neatly on top. This will make everything simpler, he said. Just one signature. I lifted the first page. Dense lines of cold legal jargon stared back at me. I flipped to the next, then another. My pulse stayed calm, but my mind sharpened. This wasn't sharing. This was robbery. Renounce all rights to the inheritance, I read aloud, my voice flat. Transfer of the entire estate to Jason Carter. Linda gave a brittle laugh. You see, Emma, this way everyone can feel at ease. I let out a dry, humorless chuckle. At ease for who? For me, or for you? Robert spoke then, his voice low and heavy. Don't make this difficult. Emma, we're family. You should do the right thing. I set the papers back on the table, nudging them toward Jason. Family. That's a good one. Families don't drag each other into empty rooms and force them to sign everything away. Jason slammed his hand against the table, his breath uneven. Don't turn this into a scene. We can wrap this up in 5 minutes and still keep some dignity. I met his gaze, unflinching. Dignity. This is daylight robbery with pen and paper, Jason. His face flushed deep red. Linda winced, trying to soothe. Emma, you're being dramatic? No. I cut her off. I'm being accurate. The room went dead still. The yellow light overhead flickered against Jason's temple, sweat beginning to bead. He shoved the pen toward me, harder this time. You don't get it. You can't keep it all. You don't deserve it. I leaned back, arms crossed. Maybe. But I'm not stupid enough to sign this. Jason's chair screeched across the floor as he shot to his feet. His face twisted, voice snapping. Stripped of any pretense of civility, sign it, Emma. Right now. And that was the moment the mask finally fell. No more family lunch. No more small talk. This was the battlefield laid bare. And me. Though outnumbered, I would not step back. The air inside that bare room grew so thick I could hear the old hallway clock ticking outside, each second pounding like a slow drum roll, warning of the tragedy about to break. Jason stood there, chest heaving, his hand clenched tight around the pen on the table. His eyes burned. Not the eyes of the brother who once tossed a baseball with me in the backyard, but the eyes of an enemy. I stayed silent. No need for more words. What I'd said already had pushed him to the edge. And then it happened. Jason's hand shot inside his jacket. I heard the scrape of metal, cold and unmistakable. When he pulled it free, the glint under the yellow light left no doubt a handgun, black and gleaming, as if it existed for one purpose alone, to end arguments. Linda gasped, her trembling hands covering her mouth. Robert didn't move an inch. Arms folded, eyes locked on me. His silence cut deeper than the barrel aimed at my face. Jason raised the gun, grinding out each word, sign it, Emma. Don't test me. One signature, and this all ends. I stared straight into the barrel, unblinking. My body didn't shake the way he expected. A strange calm washed over me. The kind you feel standing on a cliff edge, with the wind whipping your face, knowing one step could send you over. But instead of fear, everything becomes sharper, clearer. You really think? I said evenly. That this gun will change the truth. Jason sneered. It changes everything. Don't you get it? You've lived your whole life thinking you're special. But you're not. You're a problem. Nobody wants you here, not even Dad. Robert didn't flinch. Not a frown, not a word. I looked at him for a beat, then turned back to Jason. You can try to take my signature, I whispered, but you'll never take the truth. Jason roared, the gun shaking in his hand. Linda broke down, crying, begging, Jason, stop.
Please stop.
But he didn't hear. His whole body was taut, veins bulging at his neck. I laid my hand lightly on the stack of papers, then pushed them back toward him. If you think this proves you deserve anything, you're wrong. This isn't inheritance. This is greed. His jaw tightened, teeth grinding. His fingers squeezed tighter on the trigger. I could see the tremor in his hand. Whether from rage or fear, I couldn't tell. The moment stretched into eternity, the room holding nothing but ragged breaths and the weak, yellow light. Then I smiled. Just a small, deliberate smile, enough to drive him further off the edge. I lifted my chin, my gaze steady, almost daring him. No, I said, I won't sign. The silence that followed was absolute, and in that silence, I knew I had pushed him to his breaking point. Jason raised the gun higher, the barrel just inches from my forehead. Linda screamed, pressing herself against the wall. Robert stood frozen, stone-faced, like a statue. And me, I sat still, that faint smile never leaving my lips. Because I knew I wasn't the only one in this room watching everything unfold. Jason stood just a few feet away. The gun in his hand trembled, the yellow light above catching the black metal and making it glint like a cold blade. Linda pressed herself against the wall, shaking so hard her hands clutched her chest as if her heart might give out at any second. Robert stayed frozen, arms crossed, his stone, deep eyes fixed on me. That silence of his, it was a verdict already signed. But me, I didn't move. I sat upright, hands resting loosely on the table. My calm wasn't born of blind courage. It came from a truth only I knew. I slowly lifted my head, locked eyes with Jason, and let a thin, sharp smile curve my lips. Just enough to make him falter half a step. You sure you want to do this? I asked, my voice low but clear. Shut up, Jason roared, his finger tightening on the trigger. Sign it. Now? I didn't resist, didn't beg. Instead, my gaze slid toward the darkest corner of the room. I tilted my chin in that direction and spoke, voice steady as stone. Before you do anything, look there. Jason frowned and turned his head. In the corner, a tiny red light blinked, sharp, unmistakable. A camera, small, discreet but undeniable. Jason's face drained of color. Linda gasped, a sharp cry tearing from her throat. Even Robert's composure cracked for a moment, his eyes narrowing as the mask slipped.
What the hell is that?
Jason stammered. I leaned forward, palms on the table, lowering my voice to a near whisper. But every word cut deep. Say hello. You're on tape. Jason spun back toward me, eyes darting wildly. The gun still pointed my way, but his hand shook uncontrollably. No. You wouldn't dare. Oh, I dared. I cut in, flat and certain. What did you think? That I'd walk in here unprepared? That I'd sit alone while 3 of you tried to strip me clean, with a gun in my face? That's laughable, Jason. Absolutely laughable. Linda rushed to Robert, her voice breaking. Robert, did you know about this? But Robert only stared at the blinking light, his jaw locked, as if he could swallow the camera whole. Turn it off! Jason screamed, sweat streaking down his temple. He swung the gun toward the lens, his whole body shaking. I shrugged, my tone almost light. Sorry, Jason. It's working perfectly. Everyone will see it, the papers, the gun, and Dad just standing there, doing nothing. Jason's face twisted, panic and rage tangled together. He stumbled back half a step, then suddenly raised the gun, aiming straight at that pulsing red dot. No, Linda screamed. But it was too late. The gun cracked like thunder, smoke filling the air. Linda collapsed to the floor, covering her ears. Robert gripped the chair beside him, his face drained white. But the camera stood firm. The red light kept blinking, steady, unblinking, like an eye that never closed. Jason's mouth fell open. No, that's impossible. I leaned back in my chair, my smile calm, sharper than ever. See, it doesn't stop. Just like the truth. Nothing can kill it. The gunshot faded, leaving the room in a chilling silence. Gunpowder smoke hung in the air, its acrid sting burning my throat. Linda had crumpled to the floor, hands clamped over her ears, sobbing like a child. Robert stood rigid, arms folded across his chest, but the tremor in his hands betrayed him. Jason staggered, eyes wide, locked on the camera's red light that still blinked, unshaken. No way. He muttered, as if the world around him had collapsed. The barrel in his hand shook violently, his eyes wild, rage and fear knotted together. And then, the sound came. Footsteps. Heavy, deliberate. Each one a warning echoing down the hallway. Jason's head whipped toward the door, his face twisted with panic. Linda lifted her tear-streaked face, her bloodshot eyes filled with terror. Robert didn't move, like a man who already knew what was coming. The door burst open. 2 men entered. Not police. Not family. Their dark shirts stretched across broad shoulders, eyes sharp as blades. The taller one, bearded, voice deep and commanding, spoke first. Put the gun down. Now. Jason swung the barrel toward them, barking, Stay back! This is family business. It's none of yours! The second man, younger, cropped hair, stepped forward without blinking. His tone calm, absolute. You're only making this worse. Put the gun on the table. Right now. The air thickened again. Jason backed up half a step, but the gun stayed high. His hand trembled so hard I could see sweat dripping down onto the floor. Linda sobbed, voice cracking. Jason. Please, stop, please. Robert just stood there, silent, shoulders sagging like an old man stripped of control. I drew a long, steady breath, then spoke, my voice cold as glass. You know what, Jason? That shot you fired, it was only smoke and noise. Your gun isn't dangerous anymore. His face went pale. What? I tilted my head, eyes never leaving his. You thought I'd walk in here unprepared? That I wouldn't know. It's all been handled. Your gun's been disabled. Every second is being recorded. And now you've only got one choice: lay it down, or be dragged out as a failure. Jason roared, anger flaring one last time. He whipped the barrel toward the camera again, as if destroying it could give him back some power. But before his finger could tighten, The tall man lunged. A swift twist, metal clattered across the floor. The gun skidded across the wood and stopped right at my feet. The younger man seized Jason, wrenching his arm behind his back. The click of steel cuffs split the air. Jason thrashed, shouting, but it was useless.
Let me go! This is mine!
It's all supposed to be mine. His voice cracked with desperation. But no one in that room believed it anymore. Linda wept, Robert bowed his head. And me? I just sat, watching it all, a strange weight pressing down, part relief, part bitterness. The tall man scooped up the gun, slipped it into his jacket, and locked eyes with me. It's under control. From here, this ends the right way. I nodded, and in that moment I knew my family had just lost their last chance to hide who they really were. The image of Jason's arms wrenched behind his back, the sharp click of steel cuffs locking around his wrists still echoed in my head. But the truth is, that moment didn't surprise me. I had known it was coming. I had prepared for it long before. This story didn't begin in that bare little room inside a lake house. It started days earlier, with a phone call. My phone buzzed at the office. The name on the screen made my chest tighten. Noah Carter, my youngest brother. Noah was nothing like Jason. He never schemed, never chased after money, never competed for attention. He stayed quiet, kept his distance. When I picked up, his voice trembled, so faint I had to strain to hear, "Emma, you have to be careful." I overheard them. Jason, Dad, even Linda. They're planning something. They'll do whatever it takes to get that money away from you. I don't know all the details, but I know you won't be safe. I sat in silence, letting his words sink in. My chest ached, though I wasn't surprised. Deep down, I had always known this family would choose Jason over me, but hearing it from Noah's mouth made it heavier, harder to ignore. I didn't press him. I knew he wouldn't risk saying more. But his warning was enough. The next day, I called a private security firm, not the police. I couldn't afford red tape or the risk of Robert pulling strings to make it all disappear. I needed certainty. And the two men who later walked into that room, they became that certainty. I told them everything, about Jason, about Robert, about Linda. I told them I believed they'd try to force me to sign papers, and that Jason might even use violence. I'll never forget the look on the taller man's face when I finished. Steady, calm, but absolutely resolute. "We'll take it from here," he said. "But remember this, Emma, once you decide to stand against them, there's no going back." I nodded. I have a way back with this family anyway. They arrived a day before me, sweeping the lake house from top to bottom. They found Jason's gun, and instead of removing it, they replaced it. The shell looked the same, but inside, nothing lethal remained, only a mechanism to spark smoke and noise. No bullet would ever leave that barrel. Then they placed the cameras, small, hidden, positioned in corners Jason would never notice. Every word, every look, every gesture, it would all be captured and streamed out. So when I arrived, I knew I was walking into a trap. But this time, I wasn't the lost lamb they thought I was. I had brought the one thing they never expected: the truth, recorded on tape, with witnesses waiting just outside the door. That's why I didn't shake when Jason pulled the gun. That's why I wasn't shocked when Robert folded his arms and looked away. That's why I didn't soften when Linda played the role of peacemaker. I had already seen it all coming. And when I said, "Say hello, you're on camera," it wasn't a threat. It was a sentence. The moment Jason was dragged out of that room in cuffs, I thought I'd feel triumph. Instead, an odd emptiness spread through me, like a chess game where the king had fallen, but the player felt no joy in winning. The weeks that followed blurred into a storm of paperwork, lawyers, and depositions. I had to return to court again and again, recounting every detail, every word spoken in that room. And every time the footage played, Jason's panicked face projected on the courtroom screen, silence pressed over the room. The truth didn't need me to defend it. It spoke for itself. Jason went first. He walked in wearing an orange jumpsuit, thinner now, hollow-cheeked, though he still tried to wear that familiar smirk. His lawyer spoke of pressure, of a moment of weakness, but no argument could erase what the jury saw on the screen: a man pointing a gun at his own sister. The judge read the sentence, voice clear and unwavering, 7 years in prison for armed threats. Jason shut his eyes, and when he opened them, I saw something I'd never seen before in him, real fear. My father, Robert, came next. He had never raised a gun, never shouted, but he had stood there, arms folded, silent, letting it all unfold. The prosecution called it passive complicity. His lawyer argued silence wasn't a crime. But then the tape played again. His voice, cold and deliberate. "Don't make this difficult, Emma. Do the right thing." In that courtroom, those words landed like a slap. The verdict: 2 years probation and 500 hours of community service. He wouldn't serve prison time, but he'd live the rest of his life with a record, and with a truth that couldn't be erased. He had watched his daughter face down a gun and done nothing. Linda, my stepmother, trembled when she took the stand. She wept, repeating over and over, "I just wanted peace." I didn't know Jason would do that. I didn't know. But the video betrayed her. There she was, her hand on my shoulder, gently pressing me down into that chair, her voice coaxing, "Just sign, you'll feel better." That wasn't ignorance. That was participation. Her sentencee, 1 year probation with mandatory community service. I didn't clap. I didn't smile. As the three of them heard their sentences, their eyes dropping, I felt only exhaustion, a weight that had stretched from childhood to this very moment. Years of being dismissed, ignored, overlooked, now laid bare in the light of justice. On the final day of trial, the judge declared my grandfather's estate officially mine, just as his will had stated. The figure rang out in the courtroom like a cold bell, $8.5 million. No one could contest it anymore. No more paperwork, no more signatures to steal. I stepped out of the courthouse into the crisp California autumn. The wind swept through my hair, carrying the smell of smoke and fallen leaves. Behind me, the doors closed. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel anyone following me. No shadows waiting to pounce. Only me, an open road, and a future that, this time, belonged entirely to me. The trial was over. The cameras went dark, the gavel struck one last time, and with it ended the long parade of lawyers, prosecutors, and sworn statements. I walked out of the courthouse carrying a strange feeling, relief, but also uncertainty. As if I had just set down a weight I'd been carrying for years, only to feel unsteady in the sudden emptiness. I inherited everything, my grandfather's entire estate, a fortune most people would call luck. But what moved me wasn't the checks or the property. It was the simple truth. For the first time in my life, no one else held the strings. In the days that followed, I left Lake Tahoe and went back to Denver. I bought a small house, not far from downtown, with a backyard full of lavender and an old wooden swing. I didn't choose a mansion or a penthouse. I had learned what my grandfather always said: when people only see money in you, they'll never see who you really are. Life began, step by step. I married David, a music teacher who never looked at me through the lens of wealth. Together we had a daughter, Grace. Every morning I walk her to school, hear her laughter spill across the grass, and feel a happiness no inheritance could ever buy. I didn't forget Noah, the brother who found the courage to call me when it mattered most. I paid off his debts, covered his tuition, gave him the chance to study medicine like he'd always dreamed. Now he's a resident physician, stronger, more confident than I've ever seen him. Whenever we meet, he smiles and says, "You saved me from that family. Really, I owe you my life." And I just hug him, because I know if it weren't for him, I might not be here at all. I kept investing, quietly, the way my grandfather once did. No flash, no noise. To anyone looking in, my family is ordinary at a modest home, an old car in the driveway, a woman in simple jeans, and that's exactly how I want it. But beneath that, ordinary shell, I have everything: freedom, choice, and a real family. Not bound by blood, but by love and presence. Some evenings I sit on the porch, watching Grace play with her puppy, listening to David's piano drift from the living room. I sip my tea, breathe in the faint scent of lavender, and whisper, "Thank you, Grandpa. I understand now. I'm living what you taught me." In the end, I realized this: the greatest victory isn't defeating the greedy. The greatest victory is building a life no one can take away. For a long time after the trial, I kept asking myself, was it worth it? Was it worth stepping into a fight that could have cost me my life? Was it worth standing against the very people I once called family? And each day, the answer grew clearer: yes. I came to understand something I want to share with anyone listening. Family is not always a safe place. Blood does not always mean love. Sometimes, the very people who share your name will be the first to push you off a cliff if they think they'll profit from it. And the only thing you can do is face that truth instead of comforting yourself with pretty illusions. The first lesson I learned, and the one I want you to remember, is this: silence has a cost. My father never held the gun. He never screamed at me. But he stood there, arms crossed, while his son pointed a weapon at me. That silence cut deeper than the gun itself. So in any moment of injustice, if you see someone threatened, remember silence is not neutral. Silence takes a side, the side of the one causing harm. The second lesson: preparation is power. If I had walked into that lake house empty-handed, I would have lost everything. But I didn't. I listened to the warning. I trusted my instincts, and I prepared. The calm you saw in me as I stared down that barrel wasn't numbness. It was knowing. I had proof, I had protection, I had the truth on my side. So take this with you: never step into a battle unprepared. Calm doesn't come from recklessness. It comes from readiness. The third lesson: family is the people who choose to stay, not the ones who force you to stay. For me, family is no longer my father or my brother. My family is Noah. It's the husband I chose. It's the daughter I hold every day. Family is whoever gives you safety, not the ones who push papers at you in an empty room. And you have the right to choose your family, whether blood is involved or not. Finally, the greatest lesson: the value of a person isn't measured by the money they inherit. It's revealed by the life they build after. My grandfather left me a fortune, yes, but the real gift he gave me was his example. He lived simply, humbly, never flaunting wealth, and because of that, he saw through people. He taught me this: when people only see money in you, they'll never see you. So let money serve your life. Never let your life serve money. If you're listening to this, take this one thing with you: don't fear the truth. Truth can be brutal. Truth can cost you, but only truth will set you free. And don't be afraid to set boundaries. Boundaries are how you protect the best parts of yourself, so that when you look back, you know you chose the right path, no matter how hard it was. I lost a family, but I found myself, and that is the inheritance no one can ever steal.